Hi guys, and welcome back to episode 12 of the podcast. My name is Robbie Cassidy, and today we're going to discuss hydration. Now this episode is going to be a quick episode, a short one, but it's going to be action packed, so I'm going to have a lot of guidelines and information in there, so anyone who has a notebook by them or anything like that, make sure to take a couple of notes, or you could always re-listen to it, and I will pop some of the stuff up on Instagram over the week anyway, so keep an eye on that also. Now, before I get into today, I want to just talk a small bit about my new program that's out. So my new program is Foundational Mobility. And the idea behind the program was that a lot of the people that were coming to me looking for programs were complaining of similar symptoms, and the areas that were areas that were commonly kicking up for them. So it was like a lower back, or it was their shoulder. A lot of the time it was tight hips as well. And I found that a lot of these people were benefiting from similar exercises and similar routines. So I decided to put it in a program together. Now the program consists of breathing routines and mindfulness routines, and then it moves into actual mobility routines where you're going down, taking 20 to 25 minutes of going through different mobility and movement exercises, and then you're combining that with breathing exercises to get the best out of it. So I put it together. If anyone wants it, it's on my website. You'll see it's under Foundational Mobility under the Programs tab, and you can get straight to it through the link in my bio on Instagram as well. So as an overview to this episode, I'm going to talk about why hydration is important, and then what actually affects your hydration levels and what dehydration looks like. And then on top of that, how to measure it to tell if you're dehydrated or not. And then I'm going to move into an exercise to give a bit of context. I'm going to use exercise and athletes as an example as I go through it. So preventing dehydration when you're exercising, how to increase your hydration levels during a competition, and then what you actually lose during sweat or when you sweat. And then on top of that, how to regain that again, what you have to drink specifically to regain the sweat that you lost. So to start off, why is hydration so important, and especially when you're exercising and when you're performing, and just on a day-to-day wise, it's so important. So it's going to keeping well hydrating and drinking enough water is going to prevent infections, and then it's also going to help deliver nutrients to cells, and on top of that, it's going to help organs function properly, obviously. Now when it comes to mobility and movement, it also keeps the joints lubricated. So if you're not drinking enough water, and especially as you age and in terms of longevity, then you aren't going to keep your joints lubricated as much, and you could be more prone to the effects of osteoarthritis and old age or old age conditions. So it's really important that when you are, like, especially you can start when you're younger, but having a consistent routine day by day that you fall back on, in terms of if it's drinking a certain amount of water in the morning and a certain amount at lunch to keep yourself hydrated right, to help lubricate those joints. Now on top of that, it's also going to help regulate your body temperature, because all the cells use it obviously, and your body is made up of mostly water. It's 90% water, so it's going to be extremely important to keep that homeostasis, or to maintain homeostasis, and that's just your body's ability to maintain balance. So when we talk about hydration, you have to look at what dehydration presents like, and what it's like to be dehydrated. So really simple ones there that you'll notice very fast would be you'll either have very little, or you won't be going to the toilet at all. So you have very little or no urine at all. And then when you actually are going to the toilet, your urine colour is going to be a lot darker. So it's going to be a darker brown, or even a heavy golden colour as well. Now if you're hydrated, that turns to a lighter colour, but it's really important. That's one of the easiest ways that you can keep an eye on it. Now also other symptoms that you may notice would be like a dry mouth, extreme thirst obviously is going to be a very common one, and then some people get headaches and confusion as well, or dizziness also when they're dehydrated. So that's another one to watch out for yourself. Now all these are going to be different for each person, so that's why I say that urine test is probably the easiest to keep an eye on for everybody. But depending on how you're feeling, or depending on what your body makeup is like, you're going to experience different symptoms, and depending on what level of hydration you're at, or dehydration you're at as well. So if you're severely dehydrated, it can get to the point that you'll have no tears when you're crying, and that, as I said, that you're going to have no urine at all. But it's the lighter ones that you need to look at. The fact that the urine is not as dark, you maybe have a dry mouth, and that you're thirsty, and a headache is always a good sign, as I touched on as well. Now, one for me, from a personal point of view, I'd say the main thing that I notice is if I'm not drinking enough water is that when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to be a lot more fatigued. I find it a lot harder to get out of bed. And this is something that I connect to my hydration levels. And I'll notice it more if I was training a lot the day before, if I was working a lot and I didn't take the time to drink enough water. And I noticed it more coming into the winter because of the fact that when it's cold outside, you're not as keen to drink water. You don't think of it as much as opposed to when it's hot, obviously. But when the weather gets colder and the water gets colder, then you're not as keen to drink it either out of the tap, let's say. So that tiredness is something, and that fatigue is something that I've really noticed. That's my main symptom that I start to realize that I'm dehydrated, obviously along with the urine color, but sometimes I will not take any notice of that for a while, and then I'll get up the next day and I'll find it very hard to get out of bed, or I'll be groggy, or I'll be fatigued, and I'll be in a bad mood as well. So that's the main one for me. So I think for everyone or anyone that's listening to this, make sure to keep an eye on, figure out what it is for yourself. What are the signs that you're dehydrated? What do you notice that you're in a bad mood when you're dehydrated? Do you notice that an easy thing to think of is what you're like when you're very hydrated, or when you are hydrated? Is I notice in the mornings when I get up, when I am hydrated, I have so much more energy. So that's a real standout one for me. That's how I know the difference between that. Same as it's throughout the day, I'm able to focus on things for a lot longer. I'm able to exercise for a lot longer. And when I'm exercising, the perceived effort of exercise isn't as bad as it is when I am dehydrated. So if I'm dehydrated, I'm trying to exercise, it's a lot tougher to get through everything. Now, on top of that, things that are going to affect your hydration levels would be your diet. So if you're eating a lot of processed foods or dry foods, firstly, you're not taking in enough water when you're doing that, because of the fact that processed foods have basically no water in them at all because they're dried out. They have to last a long time. And then on top of that, it's obviously your exercise levels, how much you're exercising, and then the heat and humidity outside. So in Ireland, it's obviously not too bad because of the weather is not the best. But in other countries where it's a lot hotter and you have a lot more humidity and you're going to be sweating a lot more, it's really important to take that into account, because that's going to affect your hydration levels also. So how can you measure your hydration, or how would you measure an athlete? One of the simplest ways is thirst. How thirsty are they in general? Like, how do you feel that you need to get water all the time, or have you adapted so that you're not as thirsty when you are dehydrated? So if that's something that you don't notice, if it's something that you do notice, obviously you have to get more water. But if you're not noticing that, then you move to what I said after, and that's the color of your urine. What color is it? Is it a light color? Is it like a light golden color, or is it extremely dark, nearly close to brown? And there's obviously, I have a picture up on my Instagram, so to check that out, guys, definitely. And it's a urine chart to show you what it is if you're hydrated or if you're dehydrated, and what your urine might look like. So have a look at that, just to measure it against what being overhydrated is and being underhydrated or dehydrated. Because if you're overhydrated as well, it'll be crystal clear, and you don't want that either, okay? Because you're just getting rid of all it. You're just basically drinking water and peeing it out straight away. So, well, obviously not straight away, well, as it goes through your body. Now, another thing to do is look at your body weight. So what they do for athletes is they weigh them before and after, and they see how much they've lost in sweat. Now, I'll talk about sweat in a small while, but that's going to be really important in that it's an easy way to measure how much you lose when you're exercising. Because if you're just drinking the same amount all the time and then you're exercising, you're not going to keep your levels up, obviously, because you're sweating it all out and you haven't increased it from, let's say, 2.5 litres to whatever, 4 litres if you need that. If you're exercising, if you're back in the gym, it's really important to obviously take in more water because of that. Now, that weighing before and after is obviously if you're training in hot temperature, or if you're training for a long duration, it's going to make a big difference. So why is it important to be hydrated, apart from all the normal ones, all the normal things that I just mentioned, or previous things that I mentioned? Why is it important to be hydrated when you're exercising? Well, if you're dehydrated by 2%, so if you have lost 2% of your body weight through dehydration, that actually can cost you 10% of your exercise capacity. Okay, so you have a 10% reduction in your exercise capacity in and around about. Okay, so that means you're obviously not able to exercise as long, and your fitness you'll feel a lot more fatigued, okay, when you're playing. Now, dehydration does actually play into this perceptual strain as well. So what I mentioned earlier about your perceived effort, it's going to be a lot harder to exercise. It's going to feel like it's a lot more strenuous. at lower levels or lower activity levels because you're dehydrated as well. And then they looked at basketball players' performance as well. So this is research on that. And they found that their accuracy actually decreased, or there was a deterioration in their performance as their dehydration levels increased or progressed from 1 to 5%. So the more dehydrated they were, the worse accuracy they had. Okay, so you can see now especially when you're competing in a field sport and a sport that's gone on for a long time, then you can see how performance decrements could be detrimental in the end. Okay, so really important to stay hydrated as much as you can when you are actually performing. Now, how much you have to drink, that's the next thing then. What's practical? How can you hydrate when you are playing? Now, before I jump into that, I'm going to talk about sweat. So our typical sweat rate is going to be around about 0.5 of a kilo. Now, this is per hour, I should say. You can lose around about 0.5 to 2 kilos, depending on body size and exercise intensity and duration, obviously, of the exercise or of the activity. But you can lose that much per hour. So your body size is going to be huge in this. So the bigger you are, the more you lose. And as we talked about earlier, between that 1 to 4% loss in body weight, how much of an effect that can have on your exercise capacity. So when you're sweating so much, you'll find that you're becoming more dehydrated. And if you're not replacing that or replenishing those fluids, then that really affects your performance. So as I said, things that are going to affect your sweat rate are going to be body size, exercise intensity, the length of time that you're actually playing. But then on top of that is going to be your hydration status before you started playing. So depending on how hydrated you are before you started playing, that's going to have a huge effect on it as well. So it's really important to hydrate well before you get into the game, and so you don't have to try catch up, or you're not playing catch up then when you get into the game. And then outside, like environmental factors, then it'd be the heat and the humidity, which is not something that we have to worry a huge amount in Ireland over the winter anyway, or in the spring or most of the summer. But it's definitely something to take into account. If you know it's going to be good weather, make sure that you're pre-hydrating properly when you are. Now, what's a solution, or how can you actually hydrate during the game, or how much is enough to hydrate during the game? So the recommended amount is around about 2 mils of water per kg of body weight, and that's for every 15 minutes of training. So every 15 minutes, if you're a 70 kg player, you have to take in 140 ml of water every 15 minutes to stay hydrated. So taking in more than that will help you, but there's, I think, gastric emptying as well, that you won't be able to use it as much. But that 2 mils for every kg body weight, so do it up yourself. If you're 100 kilo, that's 200 ml you have to take in every 15 minutes to stay hydrated and to reduce the effects of dehydration. But just using that alone is going to really help extend your performance and extend your exercise capacity. Now, it's difficult for some people to take that in, and there's a few other things you have to take into account, because sweat isn't just water. Sweat is made up of a lot of different things, and primarily it's made up of sodium and chloride, potassium, and then glucose. So, and I'll go into that as well, what you should mix into a drink. But it is important, as I said, that is your absolute baseline of 2 mils of water per kg of body weight every 15 minutes. Now, some people are going to find it hard to take in that much water because they're not, when they're performing, they're focused on what they're doing, they're not thinking about it. But also, it is hard to take in that amount of water if you're not used to drinking that much water anyway. So things that you can implement to, especially if you're working with athletes or even yourself, to make you drink more water would be change the temperature of it and make it cooler. You could add flavor to it, so whatever, Ribena or my Wadi, just making sure it's not too much sugar, and then a little pinch of salt as well is going to make it, and I'll talk about that in a second, but help you absorb it better, but it'll also make it tastier to drink. And then having it visible, so when you're coming off at half time, or if you have someone there, always have it so it's very easy to get to, and you don't have to go looking for it, because when you're tired and you're fatigued, you don't want to be wasting any more energy going around looking for something. So it's really important to make it as visible as possible. So what should be in the drink then, or what should you be drinking? Now, as I mentioned before, what you lose in sweat is it's not just water that's coming out. So it is sodium, it is that chloride, it is potassium, and it is glucose. And to hydrate yourself properly, you have to replace what you lose. And the reason is because you want the fluid that you're taking in to be around about the same concentration as the intracellular fluid as well. So that way the transfer will happen faster and it'll be more effective, as opposed to if you're just taking too much water and you're just purely water and it's too dilute, then you're going to pee out a lot of it. And on top of that, it's going to turn off your thirst sensors. So you're not going to feel as thirsty, even though you're not as hydrated. So you're not going to want to drink as much water. So it's important to get the dilation or the concentration right. So as I said, you're aiming for that intracellular fluid. Now, what if it's too dilute, you're going to pee it out. If it's too concentrated, then it'll be absorbed and you are at risk of diarrhea as well. Okay, so you need to find that balance and what's right when you're working and making a drink that's right for you. So, for example, in 1 litre of sweat, you're losing around about 500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium. Potassium then is around about 100 to 500 milligrams. Chloride then is around about 500 to 3,000 milligrams. And then you're also losing that magnesium and calcium as well. Okay, so important to supplement with that amount. Okay, now obviously if it's 2 litres, that's in 1 litre of sweat. So if you're losing 2 litres of sweat or 2 kgs of sweat, then you have to double that. Okay, and you have to actually include the glucose that you're burning as well, because the glucose is going to be used more the more you exercise. The more of it is going to be lost through sweat the more you exercise, obviously. So when you look at sports drinks like Powerade, Gatorade, Lucozade, all those, they don't usually or generally they don't have enough salt. So for example, a Powerade drink has around about 800 milligrams of sodium in it, and as we said, you're losing close to 2,000 in some situations. So you can see how it doesn't add up. And on top of that, then it only has 185 milligrams of potassium, and you're losing around about 100 to 500 milligrams of potassium. So you want to be hitting that upper level as best you can. Now, on top of that, then it doesn't have any magnesium in it, and the carbs are all right, around about 111 grams of carbs. And this is in a 2 litre drink of Powerade, which is a lot, but it's still it does have a good few carbs in it, so you're all right on that front. But then when you look at Gatorade has a small bit more sodium, very little potassium, and then very little magnesium, and in and around about the same carbs. So they're usually the same. Now, one that people go for a lot is coconut water. Now, coconut water is good to rehydrate you because it has definitely got enough potassium in it. But the sodium level of coconut water, which is your salt, is very low. It's only 250 milligrams. And if you're aiming for that, let's say 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams, you're not getting half enough in that. So it might be important to add a small bit of salt to that coconut water. And then on top of that, it doesn't have any magnesium either. Now, one thing that is actually excellent to rehydrate you, because it has carbs and because it has magnesium and because it has potassium, now the sodium level isn't massive in it, and I don't know if you'd want to be drinking it during performance, but is milk. Milk is actually excellent to rehydrate you, but it's just not something that you would be running onto the sideline and drinking a gallon of it or drinking a litre of milk. It's not as satisfying, and it's hard to drink because it's heavy. So milk in that sense is probably better as a rehydration tactic afterwards. And you see people using that with chocolate milk, and you get a lot more carbs from chocolate milk as well. But because there isn't enough salt in it, it might be worth adding a small bit of salt to that. So when you're on the sideline, then you're looking to get the right mix of stuff. So maybe if you are getting a Powerade, it might be better just to add that small bit of salt to it, or a Gatorade, because you'll hydrate better. Now, you can make up your own electrolyte drink as well, and that could be something as simple as getting a bottle of water, adding something like My Waddy into it, where it has a glucose source. You're increasing the sugar that's in it, and then putting a pinch of salt in it as well. So you are making your own electrolyte drink. Now, it's best to use sea salt over table salt because it's a lot easier for the body to take it up, and you're not putting in loads and loads and loads of it, but you are putting a nice amount of it in, because you don't want to be drinking so much salt that, as I said, it gets absorbed by the body and give yourself diarrhea, because that wasn't obviously not an effective strategy by any means. Now, you can buy packets of things like Cerelite, Drip Drop is another one, LMNT is another one, and to make your own electrolyte drink, and that way you know what's in the packets and you can increase it and decrease it as much as you need to. But it's going to be important for anyone listening to this to find out what works best for you in terms of if you're going to be using Powerade or Gatorade or any of those, and adding a small bit of salt to it. Are you able to get enough of it so you can have it on the sideline? Are you able to drink enough of it then on the sideline, or does it feel like, or does it taste like it's not refreshing enough for? Because I have seen teams use Diorolite before, and as good as it may be to rehydrate you, it's nasty. It doesn't taste nice, so the people aren't as keen to drink it. So they'll drink a small drop of it and then they'll leave it at that. And that way they're not getting enough of anything in then. So even though they are taking a drink that rehydrates you very fast, you're not taking in enough of it because you don't want it, because it's nasty tasting. So that's what I'm saying. You need to find that optimal point that works for you. So that's why all of this, and especially when it comes to health and fitness, is going to be individual. So they look at the averages of populations in research, but you need to look at N of 1 and look at what it's like for you. That's kind of everything I wanted to talk about today, guys. I'm not going to go on too much more. Just a quick few recommendations that you can take away from this. And when I think about it, I actually didn't mention it going through the podcast, but a really simple one to follow is that if you take your body weight and then you multiply it by 35 milliliters, so 35 by your body weight, and then you look at that, so if you're 100 kg and that's 3,500 milliliters, on an average day for your size, you should be taking in 3.5 liters of water. So that's if you're 100 kilo. And the same thing, and the same is go down along the chain. If you're 80 kg, multiply that by 35, that's around about 2,800 milliliters of water a day. So even though the recommended, what a lot of people follow, is that 2 liters of water a day, it's actually, depending on body size, is a better way of measuring it for an individual. That's like a guideline for the whole population. But when you look individually, it's a lot easier to use that formula. Now, if you go down, same again, go down 60 kilo. So you go 60 by 35, and that's about 2.1. So 2,100 milliliters of water a day. So once you're over 55 kilo, 60 kilo, you actually have to be drinking more than that on an average day. So you have to be drinking more water, and that's before exercise. So if you're exercising, then you have to take that into account. And as I said, weigh yourself before and after, and you're supposed to be dry and naked when you weigh yourself both times, and then see what difference in weight there is. And then you replenish that with 1.5 liters of water. Okay, so they're your two main takeaways on top of everything else about making your electrolyte drink is your body weight by 35 kg. That's your average daily intake of water. And then when you're exercising, weigh yourself before and after, dry and naked, and then replenish with 1.5 liters of fluid. So I said water the first time, but I should say fluid because, as we said, when you're sweating out all those other elements as well. So it's important to replace those to get the best out of it. On top of that, guys, other things that you can do to get enough water in the day, because it's important to drink more earlier in the day as opposed to later, because you don't want to be getting up in the middle of the night going to the bathroom. So drink enough water in the morning. Really, that's where I get in the majority of my water. I get in probably 1 liter to 1.3 liters in the morning just from chugging pints of water. So it's really handy way to get it in, and you obviously aren't waking up in the middle of the night. And then I try double up on that at lunchtime as well, so I know I'm hitting my daily intake before 3 p.m. and then I don't have to drink as much later in the day. Now, on top of that, if I'm drinking a lot of it at once, I'm going to add salt to it just so I don't urinate it out straight away. So obviously that's going to help the absorption, as we talked about. On top of that, guys, eating fruit and veg, you're going to get water from that as well. So it's important to eat fruit and veg as opposed to processed food, because it's dry and they're going to dehydrate you a small bit more, and you're not going to get as much water from those. Couple of takeaways, guys, for everyone today. Focus on that. Focus on your right amount, or getting the right amount of water in, getting in early in the day, and then making sure that if you're exercising that you're replenishing with the right concentration of fluid. Okay, and we talked about that as well. So, quick reminder, just for anyone that wants to go over it, you sweat, in 1 liter of sweat, you sweat around about 500 to 2,000 milligrams of sodium, which is salt basically, Potassium then is 100 to 500 milligrams, and everyone probably has heard that you get enough potassium from bananas. Is a really simple one. And then on top of that, you're looking at your chloride, and you're looking at your magnesium, calcium, and then glucose as well. All of those guys are going to be released, so look at what can rehydrate you best. And I said milk is probably the best one. You don't want to be drinking that urine thing, so it's probably best to look for an electrolyte drink that has those minerals included in it. But that's everything from me today, guys. I'm going to leave it at that for now. Thanks a million again for listening in. If anyone has any questions, make sure to send them on to me. I'm just looking at my notes here really quickly. The way to measure, before I jump off, the way to measure your hydration levels is through, as I said, urine colour, your weight, and then your thirst as well. So if two of those are off, it's always handy to say that you're dehydrated. Okay, so if you're very thirsty and your urine colour is a dark golden, you're most likely dehydrated. So as I say, guys, that's everything from me today. If anyone has any questions, get in contact with me through Instagram. Make sure to, I would love if you could like this, and if you could give me a rating on iTunes podcast is the best one if you're watching on that, or even leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Any questions, send them on to me there. You could also email me, and as I said, I have that foundational mobility program out for anyone who's interested in it, and it shows how to build a mobility routine while including mindfulness and breathing. But that's all, guys. Thanks a million for listening. I will chat to you all again soon. Have a good one.